Good evening. Welcome to From Ancient Amman to the Deserts of Jordan program today. It is Christmas time, holiday time, and also winter. This program is a perfect timing for us to get a break from this winter mood. Our today's presenter, Mariya Fogarasi, fulfilled a lifelong dream when she flew to Jordan, exploring Amman, a city latticed with Roman ruins. She spent nights in the desert landscape where Lawrence of Arabia, The Martian, and Dune were filmed. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to sleep in a Bedouin tent camp? Explore Petra, an ancient Nabatean rose-colored city carved into the side of mountains, a mystery lost to the world of several hundreds of years, a UNESCO World Heritage Center, and one of the world's top archeological sites. Join us to travel virtually to this ancient world. Welcome to Mariya.
Thank you, Uma. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to everybody for tuning in this evening. And I'd like to say, if you do have questions or comments, I think, would people be welcome to put them in the chat and then you would read them afterwards, Uma?
Yes, I forgot to tell about that. And any questions and you take at the end of the presentation and you can put it in chat and I will read out those questions to Mariya and she will answer to you. And also I will be just muted and also I will get out of my video and everything is yours, Mariya.
Thank you. Thank you. So this program is about a trip I took with my family in December of 2018. We are, my husband is a retired Foreign Service officer, so I have some other talks that I give about places where I've lived, but I never lived in Jordan. But this was a fascinating trip I had always wanted to visit, and you will find out why. And my cover picture is taken from the archaeological city of Petra, which is Jordan's crown jewel as far as cultural and historic and archaeological monuments go. And you'll hear more about Petra later on. So so first of all, I want you to see what Jordan looks like, and I'll go into a little bit of the history and the geography. And it's the lilac-colored country that you see right in front of you. And it is referred to as the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, because when the Ottoman Turks were vacated from this area in 1916, there was a man who came up from Mecca in Saudi Arabia, Abdullah, and he came up into this area, and the French were pretty well taking charge over in Syria, and the British had control in what is now modern day Jordan, and he established with the British mandate the Transemirate of Jordan. But he was a descendant of Hashem, who was the great grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad, and so all the kings of Jordan are descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, and this is they are really the only ones in the region who can claim that status, which is a very special status. So Jordan is about the size of Ohio, 35,000 square miles. It is only 10% arable land. It has very, very little rainfall. It has a tremendous amount of tourism in normal times. So when COVID isn't around, you have some really iconic features there like Petra, the Dead Sea, a vast desert expanse called Wadi Rum, where we spent 3 nights, and then a day trip over to Jerusalem. If you look at the map, you'll see the tumultuous West Bank with the stripes there. Jordan had annexed this area in 1948, but then lost it in the 1967 war with Israel. It has since then been an occupied territory. We hear a lot about it in the news. And at that time, there were some Palestinians there who came over into Jordan And unfortunately, then in 1970, there was it wasn't the Palestinians, it was the Palestine Liberation Organization. And they came over into Jordan until 1970, where there was a very sad and bloody civil war. And then they were exiled to the south of Lebanon. So unfortunately, Jordan did lose control of the West Bank. So you can see the neighbors that Jordan has. Has been remarkably stable and able to survive in an extremely tumultuous region. How did Jordan lose that West Bank? Well, this is 1967, and you can imagine if there isn't much water in a region that there could be issues. And so there were disputes with Israel about the water use of the Jordan River. And up here, if you can see here, we call this the Sea of Galilee. It's also known as Lake Kinneret. Everything snowballed. The region was on the precipice of war. And you can see here all the circles here denote the Arab countries ready to advance on Israel. But the crowning glory was down here. If you go down here to the tip of Israel, wait, I'm trying to find my cursor. Here you've got the Gulf of Eilat, which is a body of water. And then at the very bottom, the Straits of Tiran. And Egypt closed the Straits of Tiran to Israel. And this was really the last straw for Israel. And they launched a preemptive strike on June 5, 1967. And by June 10th, 1967, they had won the war. Everything was over. And as I had said previously, Jordan had lost the West Bank. So this is another reason why I wanted to go to Jordan. This gentleman here is King Hussein, who was ruler from roughly 1937 to 1999 when he died of cancer. And he was a very revered king. He did a lot for peacemaking in the region, just generally around the world. He had the status of, was very, very highly regarded. And he had 4 wives, and his 4th wife was an American. Her name is, or was, she's still alive now, Lisa Halaby. But when she married him, she took a whole new name, Queen Noor, Noor meaning light. And it was a very unusual situation. Lisa had her father, who was of Arab American, and he had a lot to do with the FAA and with Pan American. And so she grew up in a very privileged family in New Jersey. She attended Princeton. She majored in urban architecture. And she had some work stints over in the Middle East. And she was introduced to King Hussein on one occasion. Well, time passed, and his 3rd wife, Aliyah, died tragically at a very young age in a helicopter crash. She had been out visiting a hospital during the day, and the helicopter crashed. So Hussein was a widower. Lisa met him, and they had almost a secretive whirlwind romance. There was a difference in ages of 15 years. He already had, I think, 5 children at that time, and or maybe 7. But anyway, long story short, she ended up taking a leap of faith, and that's what this book is called, Leap of Faith, because she was younger than he was. He had a bit of a reputation as being very dashing, but when he proposed marriage, she decided that something in her made her say yes. So anyway, after I read this book, that was another reason why I really wanted to visit the country of Jordan. So we left in December of 2018, and we are a family of 5. And Royal Jordanian does fly from Detroit Metro to Amman. However, it makes a stop in Montreal. And 2 of our adult children were on the East Coast. So we found out that you can fly from New York City to Amman directly with no stops in between. The price was a little bit cheaper. We had someone who volunteered to let us use their apartment for a couple of nights before we flew. It was at Christmas time. And, New York City at Christmas time is just very fascinating. And we flew right on Christmas Day. Lots of people don't want to fly on Christmas Day. So here we are boarding this Royal Jordanian plane and heading for Amman, Jordan. And when we land, I always like to talk about the flags of the countries that I visited. So this is Jordan's flag. So you've got the black and the white and the green, which are Pan-Arab colors. And then you've got the You've got the red for the Hashemite dynasty, and you've got the chevron, the star with 7 points. And the 7 points refer to the unity of the American people, of the Arab people, and also the first chapter of the Quran. So they would be faith in one God, humanity, humility, national spirit, virtue, social justice, and these are what represented on the flag. And we were at Queen Aliyah Airport, Aliyah being, again, the young queen who had died in the crash. They named the airport for her. And so right away when we landed, we could see that we were in a completely different part of the world. Here's the arrival board. It looks very exotic when you look at some of the names. Some of them I had to look up. For instance, Sharjah is in the United Arab Emirates, and Sabia is in Turkey, and Asyut is in Egypt. Those were 3 of the names that I didn't know, but it just adds an air of expectation and excitement to what you're about, what you're about to explore and discover. And also in the airport was hanging the portrait of these 3 men. On the left would be King Hussein, who I had mentioned previously. In the middle would be the current king, King Abdullah, who took the throne when his father passed away. And then on the right would be the crown prince, who will someday inherit the throne. You don't necessarily see all 3 pictures in your travels in the country, but you do see many, many pictures of the current king up and around. So just very briefly, we don't have to read through all of this, but this would be King Hussein with Queen Noor, and he's wearing the kufiya, which is a very important, it was developed out in the desert as a headwear because it keeps cool in the summer and warm in the winter. And the red and white checks are distinctly Jordanian, and it is also a status symbol. So you should know that Jordan is a constitutional monarchy. So the king has a tremendous amount of power. He exercises power through the government, and he appoints, and the government is responsible to the parliament, and he can dissolve parliament. So he can also approve legislation. So he really is a very authoritarian figure in the country. King Hussein himself, again, was on the throne from 1935 to 1999, or excuse me, 1952 to 1999. And then he fought 3 wars with Israel. He lost the West Bank. He successfully led his country through 4 turbulent decades with everything going on around him. On the personal side, he was a collector of vintage automobiles and motorcycles. He was a ham operator, and he was a pilot, an avid pilot. And again, he had 4 wives, and Queen Noor was the 4th wife, and altogether he fathered 11 children. And this would have been his funeral. It's very small here, but we have President Bill Clinton, we have Jimmy Carter here, we have Prince Charles attending the funeral, Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands. I think this is a gentleman from France. So literally the whole world mourned with King Hussein during his time of illness. He did go on more than one occasion to the Mayo Clinic for treatment. But again, he unfortunately passed away he was too young. And here's Abdullah, his son, looking very, very solemn at the funeral there. And so Abdullah is the current king, and he was born in 1962, and of course succeeded his father. His wife is a Palestinian heritage. He has 4 children. He was the one who, once this Arab Spring started, where the Middle East started, the destabilization, it started in Tunisia and it spread to the other countries. And there are still repercussions of this going on, for instance, with this tragic war in Syria. But he has managed to steer his country successfully through all of this. And Jordan has had an influx of about 1.5 Syrian refugees, which is a lot for such a small country. Even though Jordan lost the West Bank, the ruler of Jordan is still the custodian of the Muslim and sacred rights in Jerusalem. It has been that way since 1924, and that didn't change when the West Bank went over to Israeli hands. And then this is Crown Prince Hussein, born in 1994. He will someday be on the throne. He studied at Georgetown, and he's currently a first lieutenant in the Jordanian Royal Forces. So just very briefly, after World War I, the Ottoman Empire was weak, and this whole region really wanted to be independent. And so there was what was called a Great Arab Revolt, and they were successful. And then just when the Arab countries thought that they had control of their own area, the British and the French secretly negotiated an agreement called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and they divided the Arab lands under Ottoman rule into their own spheres of influence. So the Arab Kingdom of Syria was declared in 1920, and this was where the French had their stronghold. And then again, I told you that Abdullah came up to Transjordan, and that was the British area of influence. And then in 1946, Jordan became an independent state and was renamed in 1948 to the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. And that is the current status today. Although we just normally say Jordan, people don't say the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, but that would be the formal name. And so here, talking about geography, again, I told you that it's a very arid land, and it has a border of Saudi Arabia that was negotiated with Saudi Arabia in the 1920s. This whole series of lines here would be interesting someday to know exactly how. But and then you see this little protrusion here on the end. This became known as Churchill's sneeze. I don't really know why, but it looks like a little nose. However, if you look at today's map of Jordan, Churchill's sneeze isn't there anymore. And then this border with Iraq was negotiated, and then also with Syria. So it really looks like a puzzle piece, doesn't it? If you just pluck it out of a puzzle and put it right back in. Fortunately, for the land that was carved out for Jordan allowed them to have one port down here on the Gulf of, well, it has two names. Many bodies of water politically in the world have two names. So the Gulf of Eilat would be for the city of Eilat on the Israeli side, and the Gulf of Aqaba would be for the town of Aqaba on the Jordanian side. So fortunately, they do have a port. And then they have, of course, the famous Dead Sea, and they have the Jordan River. But again, a very little arable land. They are highly dependent on energy imports. They have really nothing of their own. They get gas from the Arab pipeline coming from Egypt, and they purchase their oil from Saudi Arabia. So Jordan's greatest challenges to just economic stability and growth would be scarcity of water, reliance on energy import, and regional instability. Having said that, they are a very, very safe country as far as tourism goes. Normally US $800 million. So the GDP in 2019 was almost 20% of tourism. That's a lot of tourism for this little country. And you can see also how they would have suffered during COVID. But it's very easy to get around the country, again, because it had this British mandate before it became independent. English is widely spoken. And there was not really any issue at all for us. And again, so we flew and we landed in Amman. Amman is the capital here. And then while we were in Amman, we did take a day trip over to Jerusalem here. And then afterwards, we headed down here to this desert area that I'm going to tell you about. And then we went over to see Petra. And then we came up along the Dead Sea coast back to Amman. We did not go to Aqaba. I had spent a month in Israel in 1976. It was another lifetime. And I had been down in this tiny little area here. And we knew that Aqaba was a seacoast time, and it just didn't fit time-wise into the schedule. So here we are. We've come from the airport, and we have our Airbnb. And by the way, my husband arranged everything from our home in Dearborn. It was very easy to book the Airbnbs, the travel, the outings. And it should be no surprise that our Airbnb the owner turned out to have a cousin 2 hours north of Detroit. And so Amman is a very hilly city. It is very, very old. It dates back to 7,000 BC. It has 4 million inhabitants. And it comes from back in the 13th century when the Ammonites were living there. And originally it was Rabat Amman, meaning the capital city or the king's quarters. And then it just became Amman. Although if you go back to the time of the Greeks and the Romans, it was Philadelphia. We were amazed to learn that Amman was Philadelphia because there was a ruler, Macedonian ruler, Ptolemy Philadelphus II, who gave the city his own a name. But now it's Amman, the capital. And so it is a mixture of the new and the old. This would be looking at a couple of the more modern buildings in the city. You can imagine going back 7,000 years that's quite a spread of time. Again, because it's so stable, there's Amman, there is Doha, the capital of Qatar, where the World Soccer Cup is currently taking place, and Dubai. And these three cities are probably the preference for multinationals in the area because of the stability. So the new and the old. And we headed for Al Rainbow Street. The signs were really great in Amman. They were in Arabic and in English, which made it very easy for us. And it was not a fancy restaurant at all. And it was one that you'd find right around here, actually. But I do want to point out that this is a very young King Abdullah with Queen Rania and their older son. So many places where the king has visited will have a picture of him hanging on the wall. And so our son had found this restaurant for us and he insisted. And so our meal on the left was again something that you would find very easily in this area with the falafel and the hummus and the baba ganoush and the pita bread. And then on my right anyway, this would be a little fancier restaurant, some of the garnish with pomegranate seeds, or there would be beef, or there would be lamb, or there would be chicken. But the food was great, and there's absolutely no problem if you're a vegetarian. There's still plenty of choice. So we really enjoyed that restaurant on the first night. And then the next day we decided to start walking. And of course, we passed a mosque. There are a lot of mosques with the call to prayer 5 times a day. And as you can read, most of Jordanians are Sunni Muslim. A very small, tiny percent is Shia Muslim. And there's really a small percentage of Christians. The state religion is Islam. The king must be Muslim, and you are basically allowed to practice any religion you wish, as long as you do not create any public disturbance or break any laws, or, of course, anything that would be insulting to the Muslim, the Islamic faith. And just generally all over the world, the difference between Shia and Sunni, you could do an entire dissertation on this, an entire presentation, but it was a dispute over heritage after the Prophet Muhammad died in 632 AD. So we saw a mosque and we passed by these stores. This store looks like it's been there since ancient times. And then this one had a lot of gaudy, as if you were to do Middle Eastern dancing, and a lot of bangles and bracelets. And then there was a bakery, and also just again showing the English and the Arabic together, a mini market, and a truck delivering fresh bread. And so this was the first Roman ruin we came to. There are a lot of Roman ruins in Amman, and this is a public fountain from the 2nd century AD. This particular one was under renovation, and so it was fenced off. We could not approach, which is also understandable because the more people who climb all over these ruins over the years, the greater damage you do to the site. The U.S. does contribute heavily to Jordan in many different ways. Financially, they are a very strong ally of ours in the region. And here you can see that this was the U.S. Ambassador's Fund for Cultural Preservation that was working on restoration and rehabilitation of the Roman Nymphaeum in Amman, this public fountain. So Then we came to the Hashemite Plaza, which was built in the middle of the town in about 2014, and which is really, really nicely done. We will also be going up to this area in just a moment here. This plaza has, you've seen in some of the big cities around the world. In fact, last Christmas, I think, even in front of the Detroit Institute of Arts, there was the word Detroit spelled out in big letters, and the tourists can hug the letters or take their picture, you know, if you're hanging through the D or the O. And so Amman is no different. There's this display here that a lot of people like to have their picture taken with. And so on one side of this Hashemite Plaza, you have this absolutely fabulous old amphitheater from the 2nd century, built to honor Emperor Antonius Pius. It's built into a hillside. It can hold 6,000 people. This is another view from a different angle. Note there are people up there walking around. And then this picture, I took this picture from the internet actually, but I want to show you that the Hashemite Plaza in front, and then it's raked steeply into the hillside, and it's facing north, so no one would have the sun in their eyes. And there are 3 sections, and there would be 2 entrances at the bottom. And it's used today for instance, there's a book fair held there. There's the award-winning ceremony for the Amman Marathon. So I think there's also a music festival there. So it's quite picturesque, actually, with the hills of the city behind it and the, the vegetation around it. And but I thought it was very interesting that we were allowed to climb all over this. As I had said previously, not every place in the world lets you do that. I don't think you can climb if you go to Rome to the Colosseum. I don't think you can climb inside the Colosseum. So, but it was open, and it was actually very easy. So here we are scrambling all over these time-honored steps, and they tell you in English the Department of Antiquities, and they tell you that was built during the time of 138, AD, and then down at the base of the Colosseum or the amphitheater, there were 2 museums, and we went into this Museum of Popular Traditions. This again is the kufia that I had mentioned at the beginning of the show, with the army emblem in the middle of the forehead fixed on the headband. And we saw, for instance, a mosaic from Roman times. Then we saw some ethnic costumes. Then we saw a statue. Well, the statue had lost its head, but again, just so much evidence of what's been left. And there was a nearby theater, again, columns left over from the Romans, lunch, and then just an exquisite little pastry shop with the pink motif there. So that was on the one side of the Hashemite dynasty. Here you can see where we were there. And this is not dynasty, but the plaza. And then up on the other side, we're way up on the highest hill point in the city. The area is called the Citadel. And so this citadel has been around, and look, it's rebuilt in the Bronze, the Iron, the Roman, and the Byzantine ages. And so you can either climb up there or you can take a cab up there, whatever you prefer. And it has a lot of ruins up there, but there are 2 significant ones. Again, everything bilingual, laid out for you so easily to follow, when it was called Philadelphia, and then Amman, and then, of course, talking about the citadel itself. So this is the Temple of Hercules, and this is a massive ruin, probably about 100 by 200, and then the outer perimeter area even larger. If it had been completed ever, which is an unknown factor, it would have been one of the largest temples in the Roman Empire. But as you can see, there's not much that's been left standing. Amman is very susceptible to earthquakes. And the other thing that's right next to it, so on the right over here, you see this model of what scholars believe it would have looked like had it been finished. And again, there's some doubt. And next to it, they think there was this colossal Roman statue, almost 40 feet high. And just because of the size, they did attribute it to Hercules and assumed that the temple would have been named after him. But all that's left after an earthquake is his elbow joint, the round over here, the elbow joint, and then his just a part of his hand. So not very much. So the joke was that the marble must have been taken to grace the countertops of Amman that had been Hercules. And also then people will comment on his well-manicured fingernails. So, but this is one attraction up on top of the citadel. And then the other one is from a completely different time. And this would be the Umayyad Palace. So the Umayyad, this would be in the 8th century. And the Umayyad, it was a caliphate, and a caliphate is a governing body that would have been established after the death of Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, in an area that has Islamic rule. And so this is an Umayyad palace up on top of the citadel. It happens to be built on top of a Byzantine church, again, layer upon layer of history. And this wooden roof has been renovated. This is an audience hall where the ruler would have received his armies or possibly held receptions. And just this structure in and of itself is one of the most revered structures archaeologically also in the entire country. So the Umayyad Palace was a series of buildings way back when. Again, I took this just to emphasize the old and the new. And you have to imagine that there would have been palaces and there was a palace and a royal residence, and then this audience hall that's left up on top of the citadel. In the distance, you see this massive flag. Skipping over to the flag, again, the old and the new, always the contrast in Amman. And then the flag, the royal family has 3 or 4 palaces, I think, in Amman. And this one flies at the Ragadan Palace, and it's 200 by 100 feet, if you can believe it. And you're supposed to be able to see it from 20 kilometers away. But when there's a high wind, it's not flown because the noise is just incredible. So also showing you just the hilly nature of the city. We also wanted to visit the Jordan Museum, which brings together a lot of the country's top treasures, and thoroughly enjoyed it. This is a mosaic, this is a sculpture, and this was a temporary exhibit at the time we were there, 1001 Inventions. This again goes back and shows you just the prominence of this kufya and how it has a place in the national pride. Apparently the size of the tassels shows off the scarf's value and the owner's status. So, and this is King Abdullah down here. And so you can imagine his tassels must be pretty large if he's the king. So one of the most fascinating things in the museum are the Dead Sea Scrolls. And these are just throughout history, so much rumor and so much legend, but they were discovered in 1947 on the West Bank. You have to remember in 1947, this was still Jordan. And then after the war, it would be Israel now, but this was Jordan. So they were discovered in 1947 by a Bedouin shepherd boy who was looking for his sheep, and he found them in a cave, not all of them in one cave. So they are documents written in Arabic and Greek, and then Aramaic and Hebrew, and on animal papyrus or animal skin or on papyrus. And they document 2 things. Some of them have biblical texts, and some of them are about the secular way of life in the 1st and 2nd centuries. So this is a real treasure trove, and the Jordan Museum displays them very nicely, as well as telling about how they were found and about the history. There's one of them that's different from all the other ones, and this is a copper sheet with engraving on it. But unlike the other ones that are talking about the Bible or about secular life, this is just describing a treasure hunt. And this copper scroll, as it were, has already led to one of the biggest treasure hunts in history. And it's pretty bizarre because I have to read this. So it's talking about 4,600 pieces of precious metal that are listed and hidden somewhere in the area, making the total haul over $1 billion. But the clues are very nebulous, so no one's ever found anything For instance, it'll say in the salt pit that is under the steps, 41 talents of silver, or in the cave of the old washer's chamber on the third terrace, 65 ingots of gold. So, but there's never any starting point that's mentioned. So it's impossible to follow all the directions. So again, just a huge, huge topic of conversation, this copper scroll and the Dead Sea Scrolls all together. And there's always something going on. In 2017, Israeli scientists in a cave found evidence where there could have been Dead Sea Scrolls. They were gone by that time, but there were the ceramic jars and the leather ties, and there was evidence that scrolls had probably been in there. That was just 5 years ago, so that's fairly recent. So still documenting where these might have been found. And then this is really interesting. Last year in March 2021, Harper's Magazine had a really interesting article on how to forge a Dead Sea Scroll. So there is a family, Green, in the US, and they have a series of stores called Hobby Lobby. Maybe you have some in your area. And they also opened a museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And they began buying up what was portrayed to them or offered to them as Dead Sea Scrolls. So they bought these Dead Sea Scrolls and put them in their museum. But scholars were very, very suspicious, and they didn't think that it was quite the same. The writing would be erratic. The spacing was different. The original scrolls split between Bible and secular life, and these were all just one topic. And so when they hired an art fraud consultant, it turned out that they had been gypped. They were fake Dead Sea Scrolls. So I'm not sure if anyone ever got to the bottom of that, but it's another great story. And so there's always this aura of mystery about these scrolls. So we enjoyed that visit very much. And then something completely different. I had heard about this automobile museum. King Hussein was an avid collector, and even going back to the 20s to Abdullah, who came up from Saudi Arabia, there are some absolutely gorgeous specimens of vintage automobiles. So living in Dearborn, our 3 adult children, it was about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and everybody was tired from touring, and we would have to take an hour across town in very heavy traffic to get to this museum. And the taxi was very small, so one person was sitting across the legs of 3 other people in the back, and why are we going here, blah, blah, blah. And then when we got there, it was dark, and I thought, oh no, I hope it's not closed. But we were lucky. There was hardly anybody in this museum at that time. But so we just were able to see these gorgeous displays, and the backdrops are here. This is the backdrop of Petra. You'll be seeing that pretty soon. Here's, you can always tell if the king would be driving down the street because you see the crown on the license plate. And maybe this is, well, that's not, but I was looking for the Union Jack when Queen Elizabeth would have visited. But or this, I think, might be the Union Jack. Anyway, just a really fascinating museum. And also there were some motorcycles on display. And this is a Condé Nast Traveler magazine. I photographed the front because it says Royal Trailblazer, Jordan's Hussein opens his spectacular kingdom. So he's got Queen Noor on the back, and he loved to go down to the Wadi Rum desert area. And this could be when tourism started to develop in that area, and they were featuring it in this magazine. So then you see this red and white. This is a de Havilland, a Dove airplane. You have to know that King Hussein's father was not on the throne. He inherited the throne from his grandfather. His father, unfortunately, had a mental illness, and that made it impossible for him to rule. And so King Hussein and his grandfather flew to Jerusalem for Friday prayers on one occasion, and his grandfather was assassinated on the steps of the mosque. And King Hussein was 17 at the time, and he was completely traumatized. Anybody would be. And so he became king at a very young age. So on the way back, the pilot of this plane was a Scotsman named Jack Dalgleish. And just to try to distract this young man's mind, if anything could distract him at that point, he brought him up into the cockpit and he showed him the controls and pointed out everything to him. And Hussein became just an avid pilot, and Jack Dalgleish was a lifelong friend. And so this plane was always Hussein's favorite. And I don't mean anything disrespectful when I say Hussein instead of King Hussein. So it's on display outside the museum. And then down here, you see our son. And in back of him, you see from the movie The Martian with Matt Damon, was filmed in the desert area of Wadi Rum. And this is the Martian rover. And the Hollywood producers gifted this Martian rover to the Kingdom of Jordan at the end because they had been shown such hospitality during the making of the movie. So that's also on display outside this museum. So we did not go to this town. This is about an hour and a half to 2 hours north of Amman, but again, just stunningly preserved, a Greco-Roman city of Gerasa, including two beautiful Roman theaters, and sometimes called, quote unquote, Pompeii of the East. So I show it even though we didn't have time to go there because of its reputation. But we did decide to take this day trip to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is very close to Amman, but you have to cross the border. But this is a site where we did stop, and it's on the Jordan River, and it is on the Jordan side of the Jordan River, not on the Israeli side. And it is believed by the Catholic Church and by the Orthodox Church to be the site where John the Baptist baptized Jesus Christ. So you can stop there, and it's called Bethany Beyond the Jordan. And you can walk around and you can be baptized there. You don't have to pay a charge. However, if you can see this group down there, they're wearing white robes. You do have to pay a rental fee for the white robes. This area was very heavily mined after the 1967 war. But then the Jordanian royal family, there was a peace treaty with Israel in the 90s, and they demined this whole area so that it would be safe for visitors. And so this is a huge draw, this Bethany Beyond the Jordan. So we were going over, again, Amman and Jerusalem are not that far apart, but this is an occupied territory with Israel in charge. And so we had to cross a border to get to Jerusalem. It is a very easy day trip, though, by the way. You just have to be patient. And here is the bridge that we had to cross over, which is known as the Allenby Bridge, although the Jordanians call it the King Hussein border crossing. And that was after the 1967 war, and it's been rebuilt. So you come across here, and then you go into a big waiting room where you are processed, and you pay something like $40 or $50 a person to get into Israel. And you're liable to be there for a couple of hours. The scrutiny is more on the part of Israel as opposed to Jordan. But again, just bring a good book and just wait, and you could be going into Israel to travel in Israel or just for a day trip, but everybody goes through this same experience. But we got through, it was just fine. And then we were headed for Jerusalem, which is also known as the City of Gold. So we did not go to Masada. Masada is a UNESCO stronghold where the Jewish people centuries ago held out for 3 years, and then they took their own lives rather than fall into the hands of the Romans who had laid siege to Masada. You can take a cable car up there, and the views around the region and also over to the Dead Sea are tremendous. We did not go to Bethlehem, where you can go down into a 6th century church into the basement where there's a grotto with a silver star, which is said to be the place where Christ was born. I had been to both of those places in 1976. And again, we just had the one day. So we concentrated on Jerusalem. And even one day is not enough for Jerusalem, but it worked out. It worked out. And so just talking about the world's 3 great religions, this would be for the Jewish people, sacred to the Jewish people, the Wailing Wall. It's all that remains from the wall that was on Temple Mount, which the Romans laid siege to and destroyed. So that would be the Western, or the Wailing Wall. This would be a gate that we would have walked through. And then this would be for Catholics. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the site of Golgotha, where Jesus Christ was crucified and also rose from the dead. renovated in the last 5 or 6 years by a Greek company. So just absolutely fascinating inside. And then this is the, this is the landmark, the most recognizable landmark of Jerusalem. This is the Dome of the Rock, and this is an Islamic mosque, and it's the earliest archeologically attested structure to a Muslim ruler, with absolutely gorgeous inscription praising the prophet. We could not go in here. It was closed on that particular day, but it's very obvious in its presence there, just the beauty of the dome and the architecture. So, and then of course there were all the usual souvenirs that you can browse through, and it was a rainy day, but there are a lot of markets in Jerusalem, so it was a covered market. So that worked out really well. So now we were back, and we were headed down to the southeast of the country, where I told you this area called Wadi Rum. I've mentioned it a couple of times now, sometimes known as the Valley of the Moon. And it's a high plateau at the western edge of the Arabian Desert. And it's about the size of New York City. And it's absolutely fascinating. Wadi Rum is big tourism business, with Bedouins, the desert dwellers, the traditional desert dwellers, hosting you. And so they really are the only dwellers that you would find in this desert. Over the centuries, the Bedouin were the ones who would show the pilgrims where the water wells were and display hospitality. Many of them have moved to the city now, but there are still some Bedouin encampments in the desert, or you might find a building here or there belonging to the Border Patrol, but otherwise it's uninhabited. So we landed at the Wadi Rum Visitor Center. We had a van for our family. The van had Wi-Fi. Here's the Wi-Fi code. So obviously our children were very, very happy to have Wi-Fi. And we are going to be climbing into this pickup truck with our luggage, and we're going to be leaving the visitor center and going out to our Bedouin encampment. And Wadi Rum has a lot of pinnacles, just all kinds of rock structure. This would be from Lawrence of Arabia. You'll hear about that in just a moment. And this is a very iconic rock structure known as the Seven Pillars of Wisdom. So off we go, and we are in the hands of our drivers now. And this would be the track that our Jeep is making. Wadi Rum is heavily studied by geologists all over the world because it has just about every mineral present that's known to man. It also has underwater fossil reserves from previous eras. The reddish sand and the rock color is due to the presence of iron oxide. And at night, the stars are so thick you can almost reach up and touch them. It's a star-studded sky. In December, when we were there, the temperature during the day was about 57 Fahrenheit and at night 37 Fahrenheit. So it wasn't too bad. But when that sun goes down at night in the desert, it's really cold, or we thought it was really cold. So off we go here. And this is a tribute to Lawrence of Arabia. This is the Hollywood blockbuster from 1962, where the British lieutenant who had lived among the Arab tribes, his name was T.E. Lawrence, played by Peter O'Toole in the movie, he is asked to go to lead. So the British allied with the Arab tribes, trying to get the Ottoman Turks out of this area. So T.E. Lawrence is given the task of leading the Arabs down and raiding the fortress at Aqaba, which is that port down in the south of the country. So this city, it's Omar Sharif, it's Peter O'Toole, I am forgetting two of the big ones. It's Anthony Quinn, I think, and there's one other very famous actor, but a huge, huge success. And even today, and look at the number of people they had down there for the filming. So quite a spectacle, Lawrence of Arabia. And this is a very picturesque artist's idyllic scene, but you have to understand that depending upon the sun and the time of day, the colors change, and you can use many, many poetic terms and descriptions for this scene that's unfolding around you as you go through this area. And this was our goal, our destination. These are goat hair tents in this particular little area run by our Bedouins. again, booked from Michigan, our stay here. And so our family had, and there were some baby camels nearby. And so our family had one of these tents just to ourselves. And then there was a big tent, and this would be the big tent where people would come together for meals. So there was a breakfast and there was a dinner. They've rolled up the sides here, probably just to let it air out. But obviously at night in December, the sides would have been down. And then you've got this chimney here and there's tea. And so it's nice and warm and cozy. And it's a youth hostel atmosphere where people are describing their travels to each other. Where have you been? Where did you go? You know, comparing notes. And so it was really a lot of fun. We did meet a lot of Europeans on the trip. We did not meet many North Americans at all on this particular trip. These were our Bedouin hosts, and they are performing here what they call dinner and a Bedouin microwave as a joke. This is chicken with carrots and potatoes, and they put it down into the ground and cook it in the ground. And then when it comes up, and then you have all the other side dishes that you saw previously from that other restaurant there. And these are our daughters reading. They're cuddled up next to the stove. At night, they found their happy spot. And then this would have been our tent. Basically, it was just 5 beds. That was it. And we took our shoes off at the door to avoid getting sand into the area. So this is one bed. There's another bed back there. And they're saying, you know, Mom, why are you taking this picture? And then 3 other beds with really heavy, thick blankets on them. And nobody was thinking about, you know, COVID. I don't know how often these blankets, if they get washed every time there's a turnover, but they were very thick and very warm. And so that was good in the desert at night. And then the washroom was very interesting. It was unisex, and there were about 4 toilet stalls. And then there was one stall that just had a hose sticking out of the out of the wall. But the water was cold. None of the water was heated. And this was December. And I don't even know if anybody took a shower at the time we were there. I actually didn't get undressed for 3 days. I couldn't even entertain that thought, because where was I going to get washed? Each of these sinks just had a tiny trickle. And so one sign here, save water, save the earth, was one sign hanging there. And then the other sign said, conserve water, you are in the desert. So I felt that I was really lucky if I had enough water just to floss and brush my teeth at night. I mean, they had plenty of bottled water for us. It wasn't as if we were, you know, deprived, but at least in the bathhouse. If you want the Hilton, you probably don't want to come to one of these Bedouin encampments in the desert, but there are plenty of other options for you. So that was our little home. And then during the day, the Bedouins would drive the tourists all over the place. Here we are in our little Jeep, just zooming around this area, seeing these different formations. And it was just fascinating. There might be a rock shaped like a mushroom. Up here, you've got a sort of a bridge that some people are walking over. Here are our hosts preparing a picnic lunch for us during the day. I should mention there are also no bathroom facilities out in the desert. So again, if you're someone who really likes creature comforts, you don't want to go behind a rock, then maybe this particular expedition isn't for you, but that's not a reason not to visit Jordan. There are plenty of other things. And here, these tourists, look, they're perched up on top of the Jeep and they're being driven over to one of the sites. And then this was a massive sand dune back here. You can go up and stand on top of the rock here. And then these are hieroglyphics, probably hundreds of years old, going into the some kind of a small gorge in the cave here. Again, that sand dune, and again, always these baby camels around for a photo op. So we had our 3 days in the desert, and we were happy with what we saw and did. And here we are back at the visitor center, and we are ready for the next phase of the trip. And so off we went. And one more tribute to Matt Damon. I had mentioned the Martian rover and the fact that this movie was filmed in Wadi Rum, because as you can imagine, Wadi Rum, you can imagine it looking like the landscape on Mars also. So the producers chose well when they chose that location. And then the other one that was filmed here more recently, I haven't seen this movie, but is Dune. And so Dune was filmed in a couple of different places, the west coast of Norway and a Budapest movie studio, but also you can see that Wadi Rum and also the Abu Dhabi. So a tribute also to the movie Dune. So now we're heading west, sort of slightly northwest, and we're going over to Petra. And the landscape, as Smithsonian Magazine describes it here, is cracked and sandy and seared and unpromising. So if you're going to survive in this area at all, you have to be a civilization that really knows how to harvest its rainwater, because there's not a lot around. And here we are arriving in Wadi Musa, also known as the Valley of Moses. We're about 160 miles from Amman, and this is the nearest town to Petra. And you walk to the entrance of Petra from here. So you're literally at the entrance. So we checked into our hotel, which had also been booked in Michigan. And, I always ask, what do you think was the first thing on everybody's mind when they checked into the hotel? It wasn't Petra, it was to take a hot shower. So everybody took a hot shower. And then there were the usual sumptuous buffet dinners. And we thought, so this is the entrance to Petra. We arrived on December 31st, and we were surprised that Jordan doesn't particularly celebrate New Year's Eve. Lebanon does, I was told, but not the country of Jordan. But leave it up to the tourists to find an Irish pub in the town. And so we, it wasn't a late night, because we had one day, the 1st of January, and then we thought, oh, New Year's Day, maybe everybody will sleep in, but that wasn't the case. So here everybody is heading towards the entrance of this world famous site. So Petra was the capital of the Nabateans. So just to know, this in yellow is the Roman Empire. So I've jumped ahead in time now, but I want to show you that this was the empire of the Nabateans. And this was after they had been conquered by Rome about 400 AD. But it's always fascinating to think about the size of the Roman Empire. So this is what we're talking about right here. And these Nabateans were Arabian nomads. They became skilled traders and trader. And the Romans eventually annexed Nabatea and renamed it Arabia Petra. But going back now to what we want to know about the Nabateans is that they had here, and here's Petra. Petra became their capital. So they had many trade routes. They had trade routes to the Far East, to China, to India. They had it down the Arabian Peninsula, and then to the emerging civilizations in Greece and in Italy. And they were skilled and excelled in, as I said, harvesting rainwater, have to have that in this area, agriculture, and stone carving. And so all these things they would trade in copper, in sugar, in different kinds of metals, in gold. But what made them really rich was the trading of incense, interestingly enough, because the incense came from down here in what is nowadays Yemen. And at first the Nabateans were middlemen, but eventually they became the main traders in this with this product. And so the wealth.
Hello, Maria. Sorry to interrupt you. In on and off, you're going. I mean, your internet connection is unstable. Okay. Yeah.
It is?
Yeah. Now it is okay. Now we are able to see you. Okay.
Oh, I hope it didn't happen a lot. Or thank you.
No,
okay.
Just now, a little bit now. Now it's okay. You're fine.
Thank you. Okay. Mm-hmm. So anyway, what they excelled in and how they grew wealthy was
okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, suddenly it's going down and coming up.
Oh, your voice is also. I haven't done anything differently. I don't have any notice on my end. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me, Uma?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right.
Sorry, I muted. That's why you're not able to hear.
Thank you. Okay. Mm-hmm. So this is the incense that was used for so much with the Greeks and the Romans in their empires. It would be used in processions. It would be used in funerals, in ceremonies for embalming. and it became more precious than gold, ancient incense. And these are two, this is very, very picturesque or poetic. And here, this must have been down on the Arabian Peninsula, but these are the camel trains. And I took this just from a tourist brochure. But you have to imagine these camel trains with hundreds of camels traveling for 12 weeks from southern Arabia up to Petra. And the stages at which the camels moved and where they stopped was determined by the availability of water. And every time they stopped, they had to pay a tax. And the wealthy civilizations of the world were willing to pay for this, and the Nabateans grew rich. So this is how they built up their empire on incense. So again, here we are back at the entrance, and we are walking in. So the visitor center is over here, and we're going to be walking on this route through here, over in this direction here. So most people do walk. And by the way, again, the Nabateans with their rainwater, you can see these funnels here. The water would have flowed through. There was a spring in the town of Wadi Musa, and they harvested this and brought it to the city of Petra. So we're walking. Petra is not easy to visit if you have trouble walking. You can ride in a horse. The camels are basically just for pictures, or they have some donkeys, but the majority of people who visit do the walking, walk. And so we are headed towards a gorge. This gorge is going to be called the Siq, S-I-Q. It's actually a geological fault that was split apart by teutonic forces. And we're going to walk down through this gorge here. And again, everything is, well, these are just small snippets of descriptions, but again, bilingual. And this would have been on the wall of the gorge for a votive offering. So we're going into the Siq, and the Siq is very narrow at some parts. It's almost a mile long, but not quite. This little taxi carrying someone can fit through there. And again, always remember that precious water being channeled through here. And so we know in today's world what we're going to see when we travel somewhere, because we've done research and we've seen pictures, etc. But you just have to imagine Petra was a very bustling city, and it would have had traders and citizens coming and going. And we're headed we're going to burst out into this area here, and we're going to see this absolutely magnificent building called the Treasury. And there are shrines and temples and tombs carved into stone, many of them carved back into the stone. So in other words, that's probably how they survived the earthquakes, because they weren't freestanding. They were safe within the wall of stone. So this one is the most famous one. This is 130 feet high, and this is known as the Treasury. There was always rumors about treasures being hidden there. Up here, you can even see bullet holes that have pockmarked the stone, but it's really the mausoleum of King Aratus IV, and would have been built roughly in the 2nd century BC. So it's 130 feet tall, much Greco-Roman motif here, the Corinthian columns. And here, I think you can see it better right here. You've got, for instance, here on each side of the entrance, Castor and Pollux, the twins who lived half up on Olympus and half in the underworld, and they would escort the souls of the departed warriors to the Elysian fields. You've got up here Isis, the goddess of immortality. You have here winged eagles here. And then you have Amazons, the female warriors with the axes. So you have a lot of symbols of also up here, the eagles, taking souls away. And a lot from Greek and Roman ancient times was combined into this one structure. So this is a fascinating structure. You cannot go inside, although we were told inside were 3 large circles, so probably for sacrifices. And again, it's believed to have been a mausoleum. And so there's a lot going on at the Treasury. You can, again, you've got your bilingual sign, you've got the camels, you've got the tourism, the little souvenir booth. And just to stand there and look up at this structure really takes your breath away. Just because of the stories and the symbolism, and everything all comes together like that. So there's a lot more there. So because we were there on New Year's Day, on December 31st and January 1st, this is not performed, but normally you could attend at a Petra by night with music and luminaries, which is probably also in front of the treasury. You can imagine it would just be a very beautiful happening there. And another movie that was made partially in Jordan in 1989, King Hussein and Queen Noor were visiting. They have had a home in London, and Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford were making the movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade just outside of London, and Queen Noor had the idea of inviting them to Jordan for goodwill, for cultural relations, and also maybe financial benefit to the country. So in the last scene of this movie, Indiana Jones and Sean Connery, they are in the Sikh, and they are looking for the Holy Grail, appropriately enough. So a tribute to that movie also. And then this on the left would be a watercolor by a British painter from 1839. He depicted the treasury very nicely. And this is our sun. So across from the treasury, there are steps. I didn't really care to do that, but you can go up there and have your photo taken on a carpet. And so it looks like a poster for the area there. That was a little bit too high for me, but Michael had fun doing it. So, and then there's just so much more. A lot of them, for instance, these are Jinn, D-G-I-N-N, Jinn blocks. They're funerary monuments. Right here are tricliniums, where there would be evidence of banquets having been held, as in Roman times, people would recline on benches and eat there. And then these are rock-cut Nabatean tombs, and you can pretty much just roam all over this area. There is also an amphitheater, not quite as large as the one in Amman, but still 4,000 spectators, except in this instance, the public is not allowed to climb all over the steps there. There is the Palace of the Pharaoh's Daughter, which is the name of this building, which is probably an administrative center. It is amazing that it is a freestanding building that's still there, but it has been attributed to the fact that it was square, and also it had wooden coursers used in the construction. And people feel that, experts feel that perhaps the earthquake did not damage Qasr al-Bind because of those reasons. And then again, people climbing just here and there and looking around. When Petra became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, there were Bedouins living in the caves, and there were a lot of hard feelings because the government made them move where they had had their homes for centuries. And of course, these goats are also home and native to this area, but they can stay. So they can stay. And then this is a massive construction called the Great Temple, which was maybe a religious or administrative building. Some of this you just have to guess at, maybe a royal reception hall. And actually Brown University out in Providence, Rhode Island, led a team beginning with the excavation of this site. So it's 25,000 square feet in area. That tells you just how big it is. It's the largest freestanding building in Petra, again, in ruins, but still. And then it has two massive water cisterns. Again, if you're going to be successful in this part of the world, you have to know how to harvest. But anyway, just layer upon layer of something here to look at, and something to just walking around and just marveling. These are the cisterns. I took the picture is fuzzy, but so they had underground cisterns, and obviously so the water wouldn't evaporate, and they are just looked like huge pits to us, but that's where they stored their water. And then the temple was up above the street, so it towered over everything. And there's always a couple of souvenirs, the cute little dolls over here being sold. And this would have been built by the Romans after the Romans came in the 1st century BC. The Nabateans had faded. There were 2 earthquakes that pretty much destroyed many parts of Petra. And so the Romans were the inheritors of this site. And this is a street they probably could have used. These could have been in between the columns, could have been shops. It could have been for commerce, or it could have been for grand ceremonial processions. So we have now explored this whole area here. And if you still have energy, you could head up to this building called the monastery. 800 steps. You have to remember that you still have to get back and out to the visitor center because you can't spend the night in Petra. So you have to really have a lot of energy. But if you do choose to go that way, you will see the picture that I used at the beginning of my talk. And this monastery was probably used for a religious purpose. There's a flat area in front of it, maybe for social gatherings. Again, just another stunning piece of architecture that's still standing. And from that view up there, you can look out all over the whole area and get this sweeping vista. And it's a very semi-arid territory, but it's still a stunning landscape. And you get your souvenir salesman up there at the top. Here are the 800 steps leading up them. There are some little donkeys that carry people up, and then you come back down again. So not for the faint of heart. So this is Petra, and there's plenty to see, and really one day doesn't do it justice, but you can see a lot in one day if you plan your time wisely. This is a suburb of Petra called Little Petra, which is a short distance away. You can hike there from the monastery, but it's 6 kilometers. It's heavily advised to have a guide so you don't get lost. And we liked this sign that was hanging here where you walked up some steps and it said, best view in the world, 6 minutes. And then you walked up some steps and you're probably going to see the best view in the world. So yeah, the souvenirs. And then, so Petra much disappeared from the world. No one heard about it. No one talked about it after the earthquakes. It just fell into disrepair. And then this gentleman here, who originally was from Switzerland, but he became fascinated with this area of the world. He taught himself Arabic. He wore the garb of the natives there. He had heard something about a lost city, and he persuaded some Bedouins to take him there. So he's credited with finding Petra again and bringing it to the light of the world, where it had slept for 400, 500, 600 years. And then, of course, it became known to all. So Johann Ludwig Burckhardt is given this honor of having found Petra again. And I thought this was cute. This is just a pun. Instead of Cleopatra, the Cleopatra Hotel, and then just a quick tribute to Aqaba. Again, we didn't go down there. Jordan's only Red Sea port. There's probably plenty to see there also. And then now we are driving back up from Petra, and we are going to go along the Dead Sea. So this would be the lowest point on Earth. Here it says world's lowest point, 394 meters below sea level. So there's a little kind of a monument kind of a thing. And then are 1,400 feet. And so they've got a diagram here. So we were down here, and then and up here, for instance, would be Jerusalem and Amman as far as the height goes. This was a serpentine road leading to the Dead Sea, financed with European Union funds. And then when we're going along it, we want to remember that it's incredibly salty, 9.6 times saltier than the ocean. So boats cannot sail in it, fish cannot swim in it, animals cannot survive around it. So this shepherd with his camels, he may be grazing them on the shoreline, but they're not going there to drink the water. And the Dead Sea is very dangerous. You can going back to this here, so it's always here. Let me show you this first. So there are a lot of resorts that have sprung up on both sides, the Jordanian and the Israeli side. And so there will be a freshwater pool, and then you will go down to the water and you will have that picture taken that shows you floating there, because you can't really sink. And then sometimes someone wants to have a picture taken of themselves reading the newspaper. But you can drown very quickly in the Dead Sea because the salt content is so high that if you were to flip over and swallow more than just like 2 or 3 swallows, your body will start to shut down. It just cannot function with that salinity. So you can have your picture taken, but then you probably want to go back to your freshwater pool. You don't want to spend a lot of time there. However, there is no however to drowning in the Dead Sea, but you do see this man's feet. The mud and the salt are very good for for the content, the mineral content for the skin and also for hair. So this is a big business, some which around the world may be fake and some which may be real, but the Dead Sea cosmetic products they do have some truth to them as far as the minerals that can enhance your skin and your hair. And this would have been one of the tourist shops where every van and every bus brings its riders. And so we went in here and saw all these beautiful things. And of course, they are willing to ship anywhere in the world where you would like to have your souvenirs sent. And we took this book, but we didn't really need it. I had taken, oh my gosh, in Dearborn in 1975, a night school course in Arabic. So this is from 1975, but we didn't need it because the English was so prevalent. And our family also always travels with just a little kit in case someone were to get sick, but we didn't need that either. You know, when you're in a country and you just don't know where to find the pharmacy, or you just don't want to be left high and dry for just little minor ailments. And back at the airport in Amman, getting ready to leave, a nice big selection of souvenirs that you can take with you, the baklava type desserts. And so this is my talk. So this is the end of my talk. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and I'm open to questions. And I hope that my voice did not fade in and out on too many occasions. So.
That was a wonderful presentation, Mariya. We really enjoyed it. I like that Big Ten restaurant type, like where you can sit. And I had been to Dubai. There they took us some ride, like a sand dune rides. There, similar to that, we had a restaurant and went into that.
Yeah, that would be a similar atmosphere. That's probably true.
Yes, yeah. And that was wonderful presentation. It's really, you took us to Amman, to Jordan, deserts of Jordan.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
There is one question. Excellent presentation. I'll be traveling to Petra in March, and that gives me great information. Thank you so much. By John Lender.
Oh, that's great. Well, do take good walking shoes. And March, I think, is also a good time. I wouldn't want to be there in June, July, or August. I can't imagine the temperatures, but I hope you have a wonderful trip. And I'm really pleased that you watched this evening. So. Yeah,
it will be very hot, I think, right, Mariya, during March, April, May and all, because deserts, right? Desert area.
Well, I can't profess to know. Again, it was 57 during the day, but I'm sure that there's always a lot of water available, and it's not July or August. So I think you should be just fine.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
And I think that's all for that. And thank you very much for everyone attending this evening for this program.
Yes, thank you.
Have a safe and happy holidays. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Uma, for having me come back again. I really appreciate it.
Oh, we are happy to have you for all these presentations.
Okay.
Okay, good evening, Mariya. Good evening to everyone.
Good night. Good night, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.